of the Common Education Committee. We're glad you are here. We are here to learn some things from the interim study hosted by Vice Chairman Vancuren and Representative Sterling on new accreditation rules. Normally, my vice chairman keeps track of the time, and so I know you're going to be trying to do dual roles, but we do want to make sure we get out of here in an efficient time and be respectful of everyone. So if you are speaking and you happen to get a hand like this, that means you've got 5 minutes and we need you to start moving quick. So with that, the next thing I will just ask is if you're a presenter, make sure when you're at the podium that you are speaking closely to the mic. We do have people online that are tuning in, and oftentimes it's been difficult for them to hear. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It will be, we're going to split the duties on introductions and closing remarks. So I will recognize Representative Sterling for opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Coming from the school world, I just want to quickly, I always did when I was a teacher, especially a principal, acknowledge those people that make things made the wheel run smooth and not squeak and keep us on track. So sometimes we take people for granted in here. Emily over here, we appreciate all that she does. She does a great job, and we would not look near as competent, and sometimes we don't look competent, I guess, but near as competent one for people like her and the rest of staff. So I just always like to give credit where credit's due to the people that really make this place roll. So anyway, I'm not here to talk about my philosophies or thoughts per se, as we are, as Chairwoman Baker talked about, was hearing the new changes, the current way things are done, procedures and so forth from the public side, the private side, and also from a particular superintendent from one of our schools here in the district. So one thing I would say is that we've asked I think I've talked to all the presenters except Dr. Coates, but I think Representative Vancuren's already taken care of that. If you are available at all, hang around at the end for a few questions if time permits. That would be great, because as we go along, sometimes questions are brought up or created in our mind, triggered in our mind, whatever you want to say, to ask, and maybe it's after that presentation has already taken place. So at this time, without any further ado, I'd like to recognize Ms. Leslie Janis, Regional Accreditation Officer at State Department of Education, and she's going to talk about the current process and some of the new changes. So turn it over to you now, ma'am.
Thank you very much. You're so far away. If you're in the back row of my classroom, I'd say move on up to the front. Let's make sure I can. Okay, great. So, provided I'm speaking on what you're interested in, I have this presentation and we can go off track if you have questions about anything else, all right? So I was asked to talk about accreditation updates. The first slide are all of the new laws, the House bills and Senate bills that we put on the compliance sheets, which I also emailed the current check sheet that gives not only the compliance item, but also the documentation that the schools have to provide as their evidence that they're meeting that standard. I would guess you all are very familiar with these since you're the ones who passed these. So if there are any questions about those, I'll be happy to answer them. If not, I will tell you on the check sheets, because they don't have numbers yet, out to the side, every one of them says new. So where the numbers are, it says new. I was also asked to point out the items that the private schools do not or do have to do. There are asterisks by the ones that the private schools are exempt from at this time. The way we look at those is if the law specifically says public schools, then we do not apply those necessarily to the private schools unless it is a health and safety issue. The next topic would be administrative code. So I guess I'm under the understanding, anyway, that the one that is getting some attention are the deficiencies, where they are adding in an academic deficiency. Is that one of the main concerns with this meeting? Okay. I've got all of the administrative codes listed here, which I know you can read. I'm going to hop over to this slide and put it in perspective. I pulled from the state report card the state averages from the 22-23 state testing. There are 4 categories on state testing. There's advanced and there's proficient. Both of those are considered passing scores. There's basic and there's below basic. Both of these are considered failing scores. The category that our administrative code deals with is the below basic. Right now, in the state of Oklahoma, with these test scores, 63% of the students are failing state testing. That is alarming. What our administrative code wants to address is not the basic category, which is considered failing, but the very lowest one, which is below basic. And only when a school is failing 50%, so half of their student body is below basic. We are hoping that we can implement an academic deficiency so that we can better assist these schools. We will identify them. We will get in there. I don't know about funding, but every time there's something where a school is failing, we almost always provide extra training, extra resources, including extra funding. So that is the category that's in question. Do you guys want to say anything about that?
You just continue to do yours.
Oh, keep going. Okay, gotcha.
She's the chairman.
I-
What she wants.
Thank you.
You.
I do have a question.
Okay.
And this was something that I will tell you behind the scenes. When we were dealing with this last year, administrative rules, there wasn't anyone that was opposed to helping these schools that were below basic.
Right.
What our question became was be specific on how these districts and these schools are actually going to receive the support so that they know how to help these kids. Do we have enough support from the State Department to go to all of these schools and give them the help that they need? So can you please clarify to us, what does that look like from the State Department? And do you have staff to go and do all of that needs to be done? So if we've got 63% or whatever that percentage was, 63% of our students that are falling in the below basic, that's a whole lot of people you got to get out and about in the state to help these schools. How are you doing it?
Okay, but let's clarify. It's not the 63% that we're identifying. It's only 50% or more in the below basic. So
How are you helping?
that I do not know. I was not asked to add that to my information. So what I hear you saying is you would like to know what departments are going to go out and help these schools and how that's going to look in accreditation.
Yes, so I do recognize we do have someone here from the State Department. Is there someone that can come to the mic and actually give us the specifics that we need on this?
Yes.
Thank
Lindsay?
you.
I don't need that. You stay right here. We're doing multiple things to raise our score.
Introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm Lindsay McSparron, and I am the Government Relations Associate for the Department of Education. We just implemented Amira. I don't know if you guys saw that, but it is a AI adaptive learning process. We have been doing newsletters to the legislature, so you should be seeing that in your email. We've gone in depth on we gave you a general overview, and over the next few weeks, we're going in depth on the 5 literacy initiatives that we have going. So we have the HEROES program, which is coordinators in the state going out to these schools that are at the bottom. So we're already doing that. The second thing is Amira. We have all of the RAOs out there also helping and doing these things. And I'm trying to think of some of the other supports that we're giving, but again, I was not prepared either to answer those questions. But we have 5 literacy initiatives. We're recruiting teachers into the state. We're also doing comprehensive tutoring programs. So we're paying teachers $50 an hour to give after-school programs. And we also got a $60 million grant from the federal government. It's for 5 years. $9 million goes out this year, and then it's spread out evenly over the next 4 years. So $9 million this year, and then however much that is for the next 4 years to provide after-school trainings and really to allow districts to be flexible and innovative in what their needs are in addressing those outcomes. So,
Thank you, Lindsay. And just to follow up, so with these 5 things and with that $60 million grant, do you anticipate, because based upon the accreditation, if they do not show a 5% increase, then there's going to be additional problems that the district's going to receive? Do you believe with what you are doing that provides enough supports that those districts are automatically going to get that 5% bump?
I think that it's going to take a lot of work from the district to receive that 5% bump. I think that we're doing everything we can, and we continue to find new programs and processes to aid in that and help them. We are constantly working with the districts on how they can show that improvement. I think Tulsa is a great example of that. They've had tremendous success over the last year, and we're using them as an example across the state of how schools can continue to see progress in their student outcomes. So I think it's going to take a lot of work from both the district and from the State Department working together to see that bump, yes.
Thank you. Representative Sterling, you're recognized.
Lindsay, I'm sorry, you got away before I could ask you a couple of questions before. They were spurred after some of the comments you just made. The AI piece, could you expand on that, how that's going to look?
The AI piece, is that what you said?
Yes.
Yes, it's called Amira, and it is a statewide contract, so it's a screening process, and it's adaptive to the student, so it allows the teachers to see in real time where their students are at, so they don't have to wait for the end of the year to know, and it also helps the students. It teaches them in real time, identifies the areas that they are missing in their reading process, identifies that, and then helps them work on it through AI, which is really incredible. I think there was actually a study today on AI, and I think they mentioned Amira in it, how it's, cutting edge technology. So
For follow-up.
Thank you, and I apologize. Like I say, a lot of these questions, just the nature and the infrastructure of this particular interim study is designed for us, okay, after you say that, okay, I've got this question now. So
That's
just bear
great.
with us on
Yeah.
that. Like I say, we try to be a little bit open and flexible in that particular route. And this is also kind of stems off of what Chairwoman Baker was talking about on those schools that are in this BLO basic failing group. And you say there is staff available to help them. Mm-hmm. 2 parts of this question. The first one, do you have a number right now that's already there?
on how many students are being held? Schools. I believe I have that in my email. If you'll let me check my email real quick.
Yeah, we'll circle back to that. Okay. And along those lines, let's say it's 150 schools. Do you have, that's an arbitrary number, but do you have the staff available to service those people to Chairwoman Baker's point, to be able to get those schools up to where they need to be?
Yeah, we are fully staffed to aid in these schools. And as problems arise, we are also adaptive. If more schools fell under this category than we anticipated, we would obviously hire more staff so that we could serve those schools as well.
Thank you.
If you would like, I will send you an email with the number of schools that will fit into this category right now. Because, like I said, these numbers were 22, 23. That's what was on our website. The 23, 24 test scores just came out. So I can get that gathered up, and I can also write down some of the initiatives and programs that we're going to put in place. Okay? I don't know that there's really much more. Let's see. It's still on the same topic, the standards, giving the deficiency, the process where they go through, going through probation or going to warning, then probation if there's not growth. So we're talking about basically a 3-year process before we would really be like, hey, we got to make some progress here. This is not a next year kind of deal. There is a whole entire step by step where they're allowed to show growth. So I think that would, over 3 years, surely they would be able to do that with a lot of help. So, and then the voluntary prayer, the Transparency Act, and that's pretty much it as far as the administrative codes that I was asked to cover. Are there any more questions?
I apologize.
It's all right.
This is not something you touched on, but I do think it's something that all of us could really learn from. Can you explain to us how the cut scores are determined?
I cannot.
Okay.
Sounds like we had the wrong department here today. We needed assessment.
No, you're doing great. I just, and again, these are questions that I think it plays into the overall understanding of this. We need to know how those are determined.
Right, and I can add that to this email that I'm going to send you.
Okay.
Okay. Lindsay, do you have information on that?
Well, I got up at the wrong time because I was going to give you an update on the number of schools we were servicing. I believe the cut scores, that's in statute, but I believe that it's determined upon in conjunction with the federal government in their report card process as well. So, but I'm messaging our Dennis Williams, our person over accountability to double check that. But our literacy specialists right now are working with 173 schools across the state, and they've logged 1,221 hours of coaching since just the beginning of August. And then we also have provided 170 hours of professional development to teachers across the state, and have reached 2,822 participants in that. So we're working with 173 schools, and those are our bottom schools, but then we're also providing professional development to the teachers as well.
Pardon me, Lindsay. Don't run away.
I won't.
Okay, so we have 173 schools, a lot of schools. We did pass the literacy bill that provided for 10 regional literacy coaches to be placed around. So if we have 173 schools, and that's just in reading that we're helping them with, how much time do these individuals, if there's only 10, how much time are they truly able to get in and do real hardcore work with those schools, those teachers?
Well, like I just said, since August, and that is what I'm talking about, the HEROES program, those literacy specialists, I actually think that we have 14 on staff right now, but they, just since the month of August, they've logged 1,221 hours. And so the time that they're spending is substantive with these schools.
Representative Sterling, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The comment was made, and like I say, I apologize that maybe I didn't get you all the information you needed, but follow me on this. So if we're looking, we were talking about the cut scores and how that was all determined, et cetera. And we're looking at now adding to the accreditation, and just FYI, being former high school principal, I went through the accreditation process, and it was a week or two out of my life. Now we're putting, I'm not saying we shouldn't be, but we're putting more requirements in that accreditation process now, academically related, accountability related. So my question is, I'm a little surprised that since that's a big part of the accreditation process now that, and again, I take responsibility for this maybe not being clear, but I thought maybe like with the cut scores question, things like that, that we might have a little more information brought forth in this meeting to address that, since that's such a big part of the accreditation process now. So do you understand what I'm saying?
I do. That is going to be with the Office of Accountability and Assessments, not with accreditation. And as far as it being added to the accreditation, it's going to be one question.
For follow-up.
Could you give me an idea, a summary, or what that question will look like?
Probably this first year, it will look like, does the school meet, does more than 50% of the student body test in the below average category in math and science collectively throughout the district? And that's going to be a yes or no question. My
question to that is a yes or no question. So how will that be substantiated? Will that be through the accreditation officer's visit, and what documents will they ask for, et cetera? Because I know right now I can think of multiple principals are thinking, what do I got to have them? I had a huge folder. I don't know if Representative Johns had one too, or box. I took accreditation visit.
Yeah.
They're going to want to know what they need. Does that make sense?
Yes, that would be given to us from the Office of Assessment. They wouldn't have to gather anything for that.
That's it for now.
All right. I see no further questions.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, we'll now move to our next presenter. And again, just remind members that all three of our presenters have agreed to stay around for additional questions that, as you can see, that might come up at the as we progress through this interim study. We now have Ryan Piper with Cognia, who basically, and he can correct me if I'm wrong, but basically represents a large, if not all, of the private school accreditation process. So I will go ahead and turn over to Ryan at this time.
A little taller than the last speaker. Good afternoon, guys. My name is Ryan Piper. I'm an ex-principal, former executive director of accreditation for the State Department of Education here in Oklahoma. I'm also a second-generation educator in a family where the family business is education, along with my little sister, who's a middle-level math teacher in my alma mater of Hydro Eakly. So I would like to just take a moment and compliment Leslie. Leslie worked with me for 5-10 years, somewhere around about, in case, and I think she's doing a fantastic job. I want to give her that atta-girl. As of March, I left the State Department of Education here in Oklahoma and went to work for Cognia. My boss, I'd like to recognize her. I may have to call in a Mayday for some things here and there, but her name is Christy McCrary, and I'm happy to get to work with her. As you stated, Cognia is a private school accreditor here in Oklahoma. We do have members that are in the public school realm as well, and the distinction between the two is that the accreditation is a process while our members have access to some of the tools and the infrastructure that we have in the way of surveys, as well as our student engagement observation tool, which is we have a primary and a secondary version of that. Now, I'm happy to talk more about that later, but I do want to make use, we do have several slides to get through here, and I want to make use of the time that I have. And by the way, I want to thank you very much for having me also. So we are on, I apologize, but this has come out in a fashion that is split. Thank you.
So something we can do is you can just tell me this. Well, actually, give me one second. I'm sorry.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. So, school laws in Oklahoma, we do have a requirement for compliance. The legislature recognizing its obligation to children in this state to ensure the opportunities to receive an excellent education is present, and that's in 70 OS 3-104.3. Also there is state education accreditation shall be withdrawn from or denied to schools or school districts that do not meet the requirements of Section 2, 3, 6, 28, 29, 30, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49 of this Act. And again, that's in 70 OS 3-104.3. In Section 35, and I do need to make one clarification about this slide, is that the most updated law book that we have on the State Department of Education website is the 2019 version. And there was a change in Section 35 in between then and now. And I found that out after I submitted the slide deck. Specifically, the portion that talks about that the standards shall be at or equal to or exceeding those of North Central accreditation. That is not what it says anymore. Now what it says is that it will be equal to or exceeding a nationally recognized accreditation model. I mention that because we are North Central. Cognia is an umbrella company that has absorbed North Central accreditation, along with assessment companies, and as you can see, we've highlighted some times here on our timeline that shows you our long and illustrious history. Cognia is not a national accreditor. We are a global accreditor. Currently, I serve in the southeastern seaboard of the United States, accrediting schools from Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Arkansas, and Oklahoma. As you saw there, 125 years worth of experience with over 40,000 schools and districts, over 90 countries, and 17 million students that are able to enjoy the positive things that come from Cognia accreditation. Our vision is to impact, inspire education providers to advance and enable pathways for success for all learners. Our mission is to serve as a trusted partner in advancing learning. We know schools because we're in schools. Cognia, as I said, is a global nonprofit that has the knowledge to help schools improve and outcomes for all learners. The ways we support schools through accreditation, and I briefly alluded to this earlier, and certifications that we offer. Further, Cognia offers assessments. While assessments has been a topic for today, we have to know how our kids are doing. We have to have a measuring stick to see what we've learned in one way, shape, or form. We provide that. As well as, and I'm sorry, my eyesight, guys, I used to have 20/10 vision, and that is not the case anymore. I used to think it was 20/20. Improvement, solutions, and professional learning. All of these ingredients, for those in the members here that have spent time in education, you see the validity and you see the need for each one of these pieces in a continuous improvement process. Speaking of a continuous improvement process, that is the foundation of what Cognia is and what we do. That we are a measuring stick. We see where we're at. We form action plans with the school districts on if-then statements. If we do this, then we could expect that. And then they come up with a plan to check and see if it worked, and then we start all over again. And this is with areas that in collaboration we look at to see if these are notable practices or areas for improvement. The benefits of regional accreditation, I am going to turn around for this. Accreditation provides reasonable data to help schools and districts continuously improve. An institution's accredited status also tells students and families that school district offers quality instruction. Support for student success, diplomas that have value in the marketplace. These diplomas meet agreed upon standards with value in the marketplace to transfer credits from one school district to another or from a different region. High school diplomas recognized by colleges and universities, and continuous improvement is a part of the school district's culture, ensuring that they are responsive to an ever-changing world. So again, 3 phases of the improvement process for Cognia. It begins with a candidacy review, and in this, they ensure that the school district or school that we happen to be at is capable of meeting the assurances that are required for Cognia accreditation. Then they go through a self-assessment. In this, they rank themselves on a 1 through 4 basis about where they are on 30 different standards. The Regional Accreditation Evaluator, which is my title, then goes in and looks at those based on the evidence that they provide. And then it's 5 or 6 years, Christy? 6-year accreditation process. In the middle, there is a progress review to see how those schools are doing with that. And then we start that process over again, not with candidacy, but with the self-assessment process. Those assurances that I mentioned are as follows: that the institution has read and understands and complies with the Cognia accreditation certification policies and procedures. Number 2, the institution complies with all applicable government laws and regulations, which would be that book that you were mentioning earlier. The institution adheres to ethical marketing and communication practices. The governing authority adheres to written policies that govern the conduct and decision-making and ethics and authority, and engages in training aligned to its roles and responsibilities. Number 5, the institution annually submits all financial transactions for an annual audit conducted by an accounting authority external to the institution. The institution annually reviews and implements written management plans for security, crisis, safety, and health for on-site and virtual environments. That includes the expectations and communication protocols for training students, staff, and stakeholders. Number 7, the institution participates in the required training related to accreditation or certification by the time frame prescribed by Cognia. So again, during an engagement review, which is what we call our accreditation audit, an AER, first there is a data analysis, then there is an executive summary, in which we learn all about the school, and they take opportunities to expand on the questions that we ask. The self-assessment diagnostic, which I have mentioned before, and then an engagement review where we meet with the school and go through this together, asking any clarifying questions that may be necessary. Our performance standards are the foundation of what we do. We have 4 key characteristics, that is learning, leadership, organizational culture, and learner engagement. And as stated earlier, each of these standards help all of us stretch and grow. We do operate in Cognia under the philosophy that every school can get better. Regardless of how good or how poor a school is, they can progress and they can get better. And that's our job to help them. The key characteristics that I mentioned before, the culture of learning, leadership of learning, engagement of learning, and growth in learning, is bundled around 30 different standards. As I stated, we rank these on 4 levels. And I like, when I have discussions with school, I like for them to take a FAME or an EMAF approach to these rankings. It is not A, B, C, D like we would do in schools, okay? F would be level 1. We are far from reaching this particular standard. 2 is A, we are approaching. 3, M, we are meeting this standard. And level 4, we are exceeding this standard. In my brief time with Cognia, I have found that schools are exceedingly modest, and it takes a lot of encouragement from me to talk them into being honest, and that's what we're after, an honest approach to your accreditation and what needs your school has to be better. Continuous improvement model and best practice resources. So I do want to take a moment, and I do want to talk about the specifically the Elliott and the E-Rail teacher observation tool. Again, we have in-focus guides and strategies, diagnostics that helps schools, as well as surveys to meet stakeholders. Now, I want to clarify, because when I say stakeholders, or when I first started hearing stakeholders, I immediately thought of parents, community members. That is not our definition of stakeholders. Our definition of stakeholders includes students, teachers, and community members, as well as parents. And we have a library of surveys so that we can get input and feedback from each and every one of those, specifically directed to those specific groups. Our Elliott and our teacher observation tool. In education, we know the first thing that you have to do to educate students is you got to get the rear end in a seat, right? After that, we start to split. We start to disagree and have different opinions. I would submit that student engagement not only takes care of the rear end in the seat portion, but student engagement solves a lot of other things that would come after that. If students are engaged, they're not a behavior problem. So this particular tool, and I love our teacher leader effectiveness, our evaluation tool that we use for teachers here in Oklahoma. My one issue with it is it has one line in that looks at student engagement. We have a 20-question observation tool that has 20 supporting professional development units that go along with it. Now, again, practically in Oklahoma, I think about our adjunct teachers. I think about our emergency certified teachers who have not had the pedagogy that those like you and I that had gone through school, that had the opportunity to learn methods and materials, had the opportunity to practice with a mentor teacher. They don't have that. Same is true for perhaps a teacher that had been in the classroom for 25 years that's just forgotten how to relate to its students. Again, this is non-punitive, okay? This is an opportunity for teachers to grow. And again, 20 questions with 20 sets of professional development that go along with it. It's not, the professional development is not sit and get. It is absorb, it is implement, and then reflect, and then go back again. So administrators are not the ones that have to do this. This could be your instructional coach. It is tailor-made instructional coach curriculum to help those teachers be better. And again, it talks about the Elliott. What it doesn't mention is the E-Rail, which is we do divide this between primary and secondary as far as the student engagement tools. With that, I'll pause and I'll answer any questions that you may have.
All right, members, are there any questions? Well, I do. So, if you could help me, let's go back. You've done this for several years, and I am trying to learn very quickly. If we have got districts, and I'm kind of going back to the first presentation too, and we have 173 apparently that are not, they're below basic. What advice do you give to us as legislators about what we can do policy-wise to actually help strengthen or provide more supports so we can get people out there? What I've done is I've gone through, and according to the presentation, if we have 173 schools that are below, and we have committed 1,221 hours of sending people to these districts, that's only about 7 hours on average that each school is getting. That is not going to improve anything in a 5% bump that, according to our new accreditation rules, these districts have to do. What do you recommend? What is the solution? I mean, it's got to be more than 7 hours.
Well, that's an amazing question and amazingly difficult to answer. First, I would like to clarify. Please give me the number again, 173?
Yes.
Are those districts or sites?
Schools. All I know is schools.
Okay. That wasn't one of the options that I gave you, Representative Baker. So I'm trying to make it make sense because if it is sites, so for instance, if I'm at a school and I have an elementary, middle school, and high school, potentially one of my sites is going to be on that list. If it is 173 schools, then it could be the totality. She's shaking her head. Please answer that for me.
pardon me, Chairwoman Baker, if we would allow Lindsay to come to the microphone, she wanted to clarify something to that.
Thank you.
The 173 schools are just the schools that the HEROES team is working with. That is not, it's not 173 schools with 50% of their students below basic in English and math, what the deficiency is. I think when we did preliminary numbers, it was only going to be around it was probably a couple dozen schools. The 173 is just what the HEROES team is currently working with right now, but not due to the deficiency. Sorry, that's confusing.
So why are they working with them? What determined that factor? Maybe I missed that.
Scores did determine that factor, but that team was implemented before these rules were implemented. So they just identified schools that identified schools that needed support, basically. And so they went into those schools. But that was before the new rules came into place. So there's not 173 schools that have a deficiency because of this. Those were just identified previously of schools that could use support.
Okay, so can we get a clear number on the number of schools that are deficient?
Those will come out in around November. We're waiting on the scores for the report card to come out. I think schools have received theirs. Correct, Leslie? We have somebody at SDE sending that information as soon as he gets it.
To what? To the legislature?
Yes, but I think while we're here right now. But yes, it'll go to the legislature. But if we get it while we're here right now, then I'll come up and let you know how many that is.
Thank you.
Okay, wait a second. I'm sorry. We're going to give you plenty of time. Just a quick question to what you just brought up. I'm sorry, and maybe you've already addressed it, but even though we don't have 173, you're already, that's in the accreditation status there, that's below proficient, below basic, excuse me. Wouldn't that be the same thing we would be doing right now if they were, and we were talking about the number of staff you have available to address that. So you just kind of got the cart before the horse, which is okay, but sounds like to me that those schools are probably very much at risk, for lack of better words, of being in that below basic. You follow my question on that?
The schools that are already receiving
Yes.
support in the 173 probably are in that group. I mean, they identified the lowest schools, but once again,
But
I'll
they're
have
not
to double check.
officially at this point. We'll know
Yes,
more later.
correct.
But you're already working with them from the standpoint they probably has a very high probability of a chance to be in there.
I would assume so. Not the whole 173.
Okay. Just
though.
clarification. Okay, thank you.
All right, you can go back up, Ryan.
Quite all right. Back to your question, which is, if I remember correctly, which was, how do we, as a state, help these schools that are below basic on their testing, regardless of the number, regardless of where the cut scores are? How do we help them? Mm-hmm. That's an amazing question, and I think it is a question that does not have a one-size-fits-all answer to it, quite frankly, because these schools need different things in order to be successful. I think that offering them the tools and the resources, I think that's important. But I'll say this, that I don't know how helpful a deficiency is, quite frankly. There's a couple different ways to motivate people to get things done. One is the carrot, and the other is the stick. And I see where one is. I'm not real sure if I've heard another, aside from it's the right thing to do, and it's what we should be doing in education.
Thank you, and I'm just going to end real quick, and I'm going to go to questions. The reason I'm asking that specifically, since my time in the legislature, I've filed this bill twice. that provided, it was called the turnaround bill, if anybody remembers this. And what it did was it provided supports to these schools that were not receiving anything above an F. And specifically in the language of that bill, they had to receive supports for 3 years. It was a 3-year commitment, and it involved a lot of hours of people going in and providing professional development, actually sitting in the classroom and telling a teacher, this is how you should do this or that. It was, even going as far as sitting in on parent-teacher conferences to, have parents understand what was happening with their child's education. Even though it never really went anywhere because it was bringing other people into the state, and everybody thought they could do it in the state. I'm just trying to point out that took a 3-year commitment. We cannot move a school 5% off of 7 hours of work. And I realize that was just for the reading portion and not everything else, but that's why I think it's so important that we hear in this room, what are the solutions? And I know you didn't come today planned with that, but I'm just putting this on the record. We've got to have a solution, because hitting a district over the head and saying, by golly, you better get this up 5% this year, it won't work without the proper supports and training. And I just want to make that clear. Anyway, with that, Vice Chair Vancuren, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a couple of questions. Do private schools go through the accreditation process each year?
They do.
And if so, can you discuss?
1 second. I'm getting a shaking head from my boss, which means that I need to defer. If I could recognize Christy McCrary, please. And to be clear, I wanted to make sure, just one point of clarification, when you're saying accreditation, you're talking about Oklahoma State Department of Education accreditation, or are you asking about Cognia accreditation?
Whatever it takes for a private school to reach an accreditation process, what is it that they go through? What are the parts? What does the whole process look like? What are they?
Well, that's a great question. And there are two different answers. Through Cognia, it is Christy, I'm going to let you.
All right.
I'll cover
Get this thing down where it's nice and short for me. I'm going to backtrack a couple of slides, and I'm going to backtrack. There we go.
Could you please introduce your name again?
Sorry, my name is Christy McCreary. I'm Regional Director for Cognia. I support schools in Oklahoma and Louisiana. And prior to my time with Cognia, I've been with Cognia for almost I'm in my 4th year. And prior to that, I was at the State Department of Education in the assessment office, actually. So, but as far as the Cognia's accreditation process, whether it is a public school, whether it is a private school, schools do not go through this process on a yearly basis. We have what's currently in place is a 6-year accreditation cycle, so that every school has that intense touch point every 6 years. Every school has a lesser intense review every 3 years. But when a school goes through this process, whether it is a public school, whether it is a private school, whether it is in Oklahoma, in North Dakota, in Finland, every school goes through the process that you see on the screen, where they gather all of their student performance data. They look at classroom data, formative assessment data, interim assessment data, summative assessment data, attendance data, discipline data, everything they collect on students, and they dig into that data, and they form an understanding of what are we doing well, where do we want to see improvement, and then we walk them through a root cause analysis process to get to the crux of the issue and have them write a theory of action so that they have a game plan to get where they want to go. So we do that for student performance analysis, or for student performance data, because we know we've got to measure that to make sure that our students are growing accordingly. But we also have to understand that stakeholder feedback. So every single school gathers stakeholder feedback. Most of them do it through surveys, some do through focus groups, or a combination of those. But what we have to understand is our stakeholders' perceptions is their reality. And if we don't like that perception, it's up to us to do something about it. And you can't do anything about it unless you understand it. So we require our schools to dig into that data and understand, okay, when it comes to our stakeholders, what are we doing well? Where do we want to see improvement? And then make a plan to do something about it. And then we also do that for that engagement piece that Mr. Piper talked about. We have every school conduct a quantifiable measure of student engagement through that Elliott observation tool and identify, okay, when it comes to student engagement, what are we doing well? Where do we want to see improvement? And so forth. And every single school that is a Cognia, all of those 40,000 schools in more than 90 countries go through that process. And the timeline on that does differ a little bit. We have some states that have in state statute that they have to go through the process every 5 years, for instance. That's the case in North Dakota. And as a result, our North Dakota schools go through the process every 5 years, whereas many of our schools go through every 6 years. And so we make sure first and foremost that we're following any state laws, because that is one of our assurances that every school must be following all state laws.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that answer. I have one more question. I don't know if you're the one that asked this or not. I think you said it right at the beginning. So are student test scores, are they part of the private school accreditation process?
One more point of clarification. Are we talking about Oklahoma State Department of Education, or are we talking about Cognia? Christy, I'm going to let you.
It's that student performance data piece. So we support unique schools all over the world, and we have most of our schools do administer summative assessments. They administer those standardized assessments. But we have some schools who were created as a means of avoiding that standardized assessment piece. And so they have to have other means of assessing their student progress, because we do require that every school understand how their students are performing according to the standards that they have set. And most schools, that is through a statewide summative assessment or even just a more nationally normed summative assessment. But for others, it's through individualized assessment.
Representative Caldwell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And it's kind of some philosophical conversations here a little bit, just based on some comments you made. And we can get Lindsay up here to verify some of this information. But I hope you'll trust me in stating, and you probably know this from your previous time at SDE, but we already had, prior to these rules, we had schools that had deficiencies that had nothing related to this. I think there were 150 some schools or something like that that already had deficiencies. So this is not like a new concept. Would you agree with that?
Deficiencies are not a new concept. The deficiency for performance on assessment is.
Right.
And when I say new, I mean since the election of the previous, not Superintendent Walters, but the previous superintendent. It was 1 year into Superintendent Hoffmeister's term that was done away with. So it has been done before. That is, deficiencies have been tied to assessment results.
And so this is the philosophical part. And while I would agree, I think there's certainly a role for some of the things that you mentioned from the state level. I mean, this is my favorite topic here in this particular room, which is the topic of local control, which is local control when we want it, unless we don't want it. But today we do, but we kind of don't kind of want it. So I just always somewhat get a chuckle of we want local control. We want the answers to come from our local board, and that's their responsibility, unless we don't want it. And then we want that total solution to come from the state and from the legislature and whatever. So I just want to say, I guess my question to you is on the previous types of deficiencies that we had, or deficiencies based on academic performance, where's the role in fixing the problem on a local level? I ask the easy questions.
I want you to start and I'll close.
Okay. All right, we'll do it that way. All right, so what I would like to do is I would like to tell you a little bit about of information about some of the work that we've done in other states. So Cognia, Mr. Piper mentioned that we have 4 main pillars of support that we have for schools. We have that accreditation piece that we've talked about that today. We've got the assessment piece that has been, as far as I'm concerned, kind of that elephant in the room that I'm dancing around. But we also have the continuous improvement supports. And one of the continuous improvement supports that we have for schools is what we call diagnostic reviews. And we have contracts in Kentucky. We have a contract in Mississippi. And what Kentucky is doing, for instance, they are taking their bottom performing schools, like the ones that we're discussing today, and the state is actually having them hold a diagnostic review through Cognia. And forgive me for not coming prepared with specific numbers on improvement for that, but I can provide that afterwards. But we also have recently had Johns Hopkins University conducted a study of Cognia's diagnostic review process. And that diagnostic review process, we actually send a team of people into a school multiple times over the school year to conduct observations, to do interviews, to really do all of the things you see on the screen behind me multiple times throughout a single school year to identify, okay, what really, where can we drill down and really make a difference for these students? And so they're kind of like the accreditation engagement review on steroids, but we have teams of people descend on that school multiple times to sit down and have conversations and give coaching support and help them with that. And we have the number of schools that have increased their status from a grade level of an F and to move up from that is really phenomenal. And I can't tell you the specific numbers off the top of my head, but I will use the diagnostics review that we conducted last year in 6 different schools in Mississippi as an example. And I got word just last week that 2 of those 6 schools are off of the F list. And is that 100% because of the work that we've done? No. But is it supported by the work we've done? I fully believe it is.
Representative Provenzano, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I apologize if you have more to add. If you don't, I'm sorry for cutting you off, Representative.
Well, as I said, I wanted to close because I'm a huge believer in local control. And what we have with our locally elected school board is the smallest and most basic form of government that is available. These are people that go to church together, they go to school together, they commune together, and should know the goings-on at the school in which they've been elected to serve. That, much like students, there are varying degrees of that and involvement therein from district to district and school to school. That said, they hire the school superintendent, who should be the academic spearhead of the district. And then they should support that person in that role with what they need to be able to get those things done, to be able to move forward, to be able to continuously improve. I don't know if I fully answered your question, but I hope I have.
Representative Caldwell, you're recognized.
Kind of. I think my point was with that a little bit. I think we have to be a little bit careful in where that responsibility lies to solve those deficiencies and whatnot. And I would argue it shouldn't come solely from this building or solely from another. I think it has to work in a partnership between the two, theoretically. So my last thing, if I can just comment, and I don't know if this is where the Vice Chair was going or not in his question about private schools and accreditation, but I have made this offer privately to various superintendents yet to have taken me up on it, but I would offer it to the members of this room as well. If we want to do a system of accountability like our private schools have, where 100% of the money follows the kid, and which is, I would say, actual accountability, I would be happy to run a bill that gets rid of all of this stuff, that gets rid of all of these accountability measures. I'll make the first bill I file. I'll walk upstairs and go file it right now. That's actual accountability, not the faux government accountability that we're talking about right now. So when we talk about these contrasting systems, I just want to say that I guess that would go both ways. And if you want to hop on board with me, I'd love to work with you on it. I mean, because if we can get rid of all these deficiencies and whatever else, if we're really going to make it what is real accountability.
Representative Provenzano, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Now I have 3 questions. My first question is surrounding private schools and accreditation, and you do accredit certain private schools within the state of Oklahoma, correct? For your smaller schools, they tend to open and shut down more frequently, not often, but more than your larger private schools. What is the accreditation requirement for record keeping for like the student database? Can you help me with that?
So one of our assurances, one of our policies and procedures that we have for Cognia is they have to have a records plan in place if they close, because they do close. We had that situation happen in Tulsa about 18 months ago. We had a private school that closed. They shut the doors, and we had in our files exactly where those student records were to be housed. And rarely does this happen, but it happened one day. I got a phone call from Tulsa Tech, and they needed a transcript. And so I started making phone calls, and this school, I didn't get any phone calls. I didn't get any answers. And I stopped by there because I live not too far from Tulsa. I was in Tulsa. I stopped by the place where those records were to be kept and was able to get a hold of somebody who could get me into that office, and we hunted them down. That student was able to go into Tulsa Tech. She is working on her, her further education. So we have those in place. Typically, it's not so hard to get a hold of schools. This one was a little difficult, but we made it happen. But we do have requirements for where they keep records and that they have to be kept in a secure location.
For follow-up.
Thank you, ma'am. So same exact scenario, but we were not able to track down the student transcript. She had gone to Tulsa Community College, and so they gave her a photocopy of her transcript, and she's not able to secure her transcript from high school, just a photocopy. And so I'm wondering what the accountability measure is for a school that has shut down that does not meet that requirement that you have. What's the outcome for kids?
And unfortunately, if the school is shut down, there's really nothing we can do about it. Okay. When that has happened, and we have had that happen occasionally, the higher ed facilities have a plan B. Or I dealt with one in Louisiana that had a situation like that, and the child or a young adult was trying to join the military. They had a plan B. Their preference was for the transcript, but there was a plan B in place.
For follow-up.
Thank you. And you're not the only private school accreditation
Correct.
body, right?
Correct.
Do you know how many are in the state of Oklahoma?
I'm not sure of exactly how many are members of OPSAC. It's in the 15-ish range. We are a member of OPSAC, but with what we currently know about accreditation, there's really no limit to how many there could be in Oklahoma.
Okay. Final follow-up.
Thank you, ma'am. I believe this might be for the State Department of Education, but for those 173 schools that are currently getting the HERO support, and including the schools that will, the couple of dozen that are going to be below basic, do you have those schools broken out into subgroups to identify which subgroups led to that school becoming below basic? And if so, we would love to have a copy of that, I believe, and I'd like to know which populations in particular, if they're the special education populations that are keeping these schools rated as such.
All of our data is broken up by subgroup, so I'd be happy to provide that for you when we get it.
Representative Lowe, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Ryan, I'm going to go back to a question. Really, it goes back to what the chair asked a while ago. And I don't know if I really want your opinion, okay? I know the background and so on, but it may be uncomfortable like this, because she asked you, what is needed to improve these failing schools, if I if I remember right. It's pretty close to where she knows I can't quote her anyway. But, and your answer was tools and resources. I love buzzwords, but that doesn't help me. I need to know, I want your opinion. What do we need to be doing to get these schools back up? Because, yes, we've started some programs and talked about hero programs and so on, but give me some suggestions where we can keep moving forward.
So perfect world, money no object. This would be a collaborative approach with each individual school.
We have an object then.
If you'll allow me a little latitude, I'll go ahead and answer, and then we can circle back and we can start paring down as we possibly can to make it a feasible thing. But what it needs to be a collaborative effort with all three entities, right? The legislature, the State Department of Education, and school districts. Okay, because I said a moment ago, there is no blanket approach. There are no magic pills. There's no magic bullets that we can plug in and play to every single one of these, because the reasons that we are in the places that we're in academically are going to differ from place to place. So it could be resources. It could be supports. It could be that they've had an incredibly difficult time staffing. It could, the list goes on. And guys, I'm as tired of talking about COVID as anybody is, but we can't ignore the fact that there was a detrimental effect to education that came on the back of that. We can't ignore that. So we have to, again, collaboratively, non-punitively, address each school as an individual, or each site as an individual, and then collaboratively come up with a solution, come up with an action plan for that solution, provide them what they need, put that action plan into place, and then circle back around and see if it worked. And PDQ. We don't need to wait years before we circle back to see if it worked. So, in my opinion, that is the most realistic approach to success, academic success, in a school that is struggling.
For follow-up?
And that's where Cognia comes in.
Yes, sir.
Exactly. So would it be a suggestion or a thought, you think, if we could take these low-end failing schools and put them in y'all's program, that we could probably see that turn around possibly faster?
Don't know about speed, because again, this is a collaboration and this is something that we need for both of them. And I don't know what the alternative is to say that we're faster than fill in the blank. I'm not certain. What I'll say is that in my time with Cognia, I've been able to be witness to some pretty impressive turnarounds in the amount of time that it takes to see it. I'd love that opportunity.
All right. I see no further questions. Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It is my honor to introduce my superintendent at Owasso Public Schools, which is, as everyone in this room knows, the best school in the state of Oklahoma.
Rams. Yeah.
Because I graduated from there, I have that kind of pride. But I'm happy to. Yeah, they had lower standards.
Coach selection sometimes to be questioned.
But I'd like to introduce. Hey, can I get some respect? I would like to introduce Dr. Margaret Coates and her team that are here to discuss and talk about the process of accreditation for public schools in the state of Oklahoma.
So much, Representative Vancuren, and actually we worked together at the mid-high, Owasso Mid-High, and we coached basketball together. And he's a great coach, and that's what makes him probably a great representative. Those tough battles on the court. Again, my name is Margaret Coates, and superintendent with Owasso Public Schools. I started my career in Owasso. Worked as a geometry teacher and then became assistant principal, and then left Owasso for a school district down south, Broken Arrow, and was a principal there and worked my way up to assistant superintendent in Broken Arrow, and then found my way back home to Owasso as assistant superintendent, and I've been the superintendent for the past 3.5 years and love every minute of it. It's challenging every day. I will say accreditation is not one of the things that I love, and I, as a principal, went through that accreditation process. So many of you that are in the room that are in education, you understand all the compliance pieces and dotting the I's and crossing the T's and all the red tape that we go through every year to make sure that we are meeting the accountability standards in the state. And in our school district, I'm lucky enough to have someone do the accreditation process for us, and his name is Russell Thornton, and he's our Executive Director of Technology. And I also want to welcome or introduce our other team members that are here with us today, Paul Croft, Director of Safety and Security, and Kerwin Kerner, our Assistant Superintendent of District Services. And Kerwin Kerner used to be the person that was in charge of accreditation, and he was cheering to be able to hand it over to Russell Thornton. And the reason we put it in with Mr. Thornton is because he is the Director or Executive Director of Technology. He deals with the data piece and that compliance part and the moving of data, student data, teacher data within our student information system, with the WAVE, with the State Department. So he's amazing with that, and he does a great job. So I will turn it over now to Mr. Thornton so he can tell you all about the accreditation process.
That's not quite all of it, but it is the district piece. So good afternoon. My name is Russell Thornton, and I am the Executive Director of Technology at Owasso Public Schools, and I was asked to come and just focus primarily on the process, what the process looks like for school districts in Oklahoma, in particular Owasso Public Schools. So that's where my focus will be today. So to start with, we hit it one too many times. So the Standards of Accreditation Manual is 384 pages, and it consists of authoritative statutes and codes, most of them from Title 70, as I'm sure you're all familiar with, a lot of administrative codes, USC codes, CFR codes, and also we must, of course, meet the requirements for any State Board of Education mandates that come through. So while the district is responsible for meeting all the requirements within the standards of accreditation, again, the focus of my presentation today will be to just give you an idea of what that accreditation process looks like for Owasso schools within a 1-year time frame. So that's what I'll do today. So this generally starts in the fall, and Ms. Janice mentioned earlier that and I believe she provided you already with the fall 24-25 checklist. I have that as well, but since she's already given that to you, I'll just let you use the one that she gave you. So provided
the full year checklist.
Oh, the full year checklist. Okay, we may. I can get that one to you then if you wish to have that. So in the fall, primarily, it's intended to check for items that are required to be completed sometime during the fall semester. Some of those items include the Alternative Education Plan, OCAS Revenue and Expenditure Reports, our estimate of needs, accreditation waivers and deregulation applications, school personnel initial reports, and various other district level standards chosen by the OSD each year. Some examples of those are to make sure that we're doing our felony background checks, make sure we have our natural disaster and medical emergency plans in place, teacher administrator evaluator certifications, professional development offerings, check on our curriculum, making sure we're meeting the standards there, Open Meeting Act requirements, and various other policies. This checklist typically includes newly mandated requirements, and I believe Ms. Janice also mentioned that. In addition to these things, the transportation items that are checked are to make sure that we're in compliance with our evacuation drills, the pre-trip, post-trip inspections, licenses, so on and so forth, that the school sites have the proper handbooks, safe and healthy committees, diabetes management plans, CPR certifications, and so on. And then also to check for athletics to make sure that we have that the coaches and staff are properly certified with care and prevention, sudden cardiac arrest, CPR, AED, and first aid. So a couple of reports that I'd like to mention, because they are directly tied to the accreditation process, are the school personnel report and class size verification. The school personnel report ensures that teachers are paid in accordance with state law and maintains historical employment data. While the class size verification report provides the legislator with data on the classroom sizes throughout the state, it also provides data to verify individual school districts are meeting class size requirements. And again, the reason I bring these up is because these two applications feed data into the accreditation application. So a couple of notes here. House Bill 1017, some language in that statute states that the elementary class sizes are based on average daily membership for the entire first quarter of a school year. For us this year, that is Friday, October the 11th. Sometimes that's later. Secondary class size counts are a snapshot taken on October 1st. I'll point out why that's important to note here in just a second. But so the school personnel report and the class size reports are currently due October the 15th, and they must be they must be completed prior to the accreditation, because those systems feed teacher data and student data into the accreditation report. Thankfully, this year, the due date for the accreditation application was moved to October 30th. And this was a huge deal for me. And if anybody in this room had any part in getting that done, I say thank you, because this is a much more reasonable deadline for districts to meet. Because the first quarter ends either so closely to October the 15th or sometimes even after the 15th. It made it nearly impossible to even meet that requirement in some cases. One little pitch I will throw in here, and I realize that these are statute based, and that the ADM, the first quarter requirement or date for elementary, and the snapshot on October 1 for secondary probably come from two different pieces of legislation, so I don't know how complicated it would be to change that, but it would be nice if class size reporting, or if the October 1, if the elementary could have their class size reporting be a snapshot from October 1, like secondary, or maybe just even a later date than what we have now. Moving to the actual accreditation application. So again, certified teacher details are pulled from the SPR and the class size verification. That includes certifications, details of courses, sections taught, professional and teacher assistant details, grade levels taught, student counts, our school calendar, parent-teacher conferences, length of school day, library media details, online and virtual instruction details, adjunct teacher information, if you have those. Fortunately, at OWASO, we have not had to go down that path yet. Teacher and student CPR AED training details, also competitive athletic details, college preparatory curriculum details, high school units of credit, graduation requirements. You can read those. I don't need to read the rest of those to you, but there's a lot of areas covered on the accreditation report. That's where the state receives all of that information, is through that particular report. So we somewhat repeat this process in the spring with a full year checklist, and the spring visit is another time where the RAOs actually come to the site. So in the fall, when we have our visits, they come and they check both online and in the binders that we would provide them to make sure that we have the documentation where we've met all the requirements for the standards that are included on the checklist. So we repeat this again in the spring, and for the most part, these items again are at that point in time, it's meant to be a check for any items that should have been completed throughout the school year, whereas the fall, you're just kind of checking up to what's been done at that point in the school year. In the spring, you do this and cover the entire school year. These lists of items, again, are determined by the State Department and usually include things like making sure the district is in good standing with all the offices within OSDE and report and submit reports timely. residential care, treatment facilities, make sure we're in compliance with the Open Meeting Records Act again. Treasurer and encumbrance clerk, training certificates must be up to date. The superintendent, the treasurer, and encumbrance clerk need to be bonded. Board members are checked to make sure that they have completed their required training. Felony record policy and background checks are making sure those have been conducted. Title IX policy is appropriate and in place, and that we have all of our required information and links on our district website. Also, various other district level standards chosen by the OSD to confirm implementation of specific policies. So I gave you, this is actually an example of what was on last spring's full year accreditation checklist, just to give you an idea of what I mean by they being checked to make sure that specific policies, plans, and practices are in place. So on the spring checklist, we were checked to make sure we were in compliance with House Bill 1775. We were checked to make sure that we had a policy on restroom and changing area designations. We were also had to prove we were in compliance with pronoun usage, and that actually is one, as you can tell, that came as a state board mandate there. Also, compliance with the sex education, parental rights, tribal regalia, and assurance that we were had a minute of silence in place for the district. They also, in the spring, they also checked for professional development requirements, teacher and administrator evaluator certifications, standards of performance and conduct, loyalty oaths, licenses, certifications, proper employee credentials on file, and again, we circle back to transportation, which is basically what we've done in the fall, plus the addition of emergency evacuation drills that must be done in the spring. Alternative education is checked to make sure that we're providing consistent services there with our alt-ed programs, our alt-ed settings, and then just overall compliance with other state departments such as special ed, child nutrition, federal programs, accountability, OCAS, reading sufficiency, which I believe now is strong readers. I guess we'll start calling it strong readers now, and school personnel records. In addition to all of that, each school site in the district must also complete a checklist. So in addition to this pile that was gathered for the district in the last year, I would at Owasso have 13 smaller binders, one for each school site, that the sites must collect and provide documentation that they are meeting these standards as well. Those that are listed: fire and tornado lockdown drills, library media, proper teacher credentials, teacher evaluations are being done properly, make sure teachers have proper preparation times, preparation hours, PE guidelines being met, CPR and Heimlich, credit and other program requirements, and if you have driver's ed, that those requirements are being met according to law there. One last thing to mention is it's not uncommon to receive requests from the OSDE throughout the school year asking the district to provide data or other information related to hot topics that might come up. The three that I could think of that have come up in the last year or so are business with foreign governments, whether or not we, Owasso Public Schools, is doing any business with foreign governments. Whether we had a pronoun policy, and if so, what that is, and then also do we have any DEI programs within the district? Those are the three that I can remember that come up in the last year. Other than that, I would just like to say thank you for supporting public education in Oklahoma, and see if you have any questions.
Thank you, Representative Lowe. You're recognized.
Could you give me an idea how many new laws you'd like us to pass to add to your checklist next year? No, seriously. What do you have some recommendations on the checklist that maybe are not needed that we could do without to make it an easier process for you that we could recommend?
You know, I would say that obviously there's a need for accountability and oversight for the districts. I don't personally have a problem with the items that are being checked and overseen. Any organization needs oversight in some way, I feel like. Some of it may be a little redundant, to be honest with you. Where we struggle the most, I'll say I'll speak for my experience in OWASO, especially as the technology director. We have struggled a lot the last 2 or 3 years just with getting data moved from platform to platform or application to application. That has been a struggle. I know that is dependent upon the interactions between the State Department and the multiple student information systems that we have in the district. But really that's been the stress point with any of this for me the last couple of years.
For follow-up.
Well, I guess Ed Plan would be one of them that we've had a real problem with this year. I've heard almost every school I have, the issues that we had in there. So, but I appreciate it. But I would ask that you would keep Representative Vancuren up. There is some things that, some redundancies and so on that maybe we possibly can work on. Thank you.
Representative Caldwell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Representative Lowe actually kind of stole my question. And so, that was a pretty long laundry list you read through. And my question of you was going to be, similar along lines, which one of those aren't important or shouldn't we be checking? I've asked this question before, and I would ask it of you and the superintendent. If there are unnecessary hoops and just wasteful red tape that we're doing, I think this committee would want to know that. And we're not all going to agree on, if you give us a list of your top 10, I'm pretty confident we're not going to all agree that on that top 10 that's not necessary or whatever. But I bet we could come up with 6 or 7. And I've asked that of superintendents, I've asked that of associations, I've yet to get a response back. So if there are some things that, and I heard your answer for sure, I just would ask you guys to go back and think about, hey, this isn't necessary for us to do. But it looked like, while a lot to check, it looked like stuff that I think most people would call important. I used to work in college athletics. No one liked it when the NCAA showed up to do compliance checks. I used to have my securities license. Nobody liked it when the SEC showed up to check licensure requirements. I now work for a healthcare organization. Trust me, nobody likes it when CMS or the health department show up to do compliance checks. So it is one of those, ugly part of every industry almost that has that. So, but if we are wasting your time and not necessarily doing that, I think this committee would be very much willing to take a look at that so we can help do those things. We'd much rather you guys spend your time teaching rather than checking boxes.
Right. Yeah, thank you. I honestly myself, I'm just speaking for myself here. I feel like what we're being asked to provide as documentation, as evidence of us, of a district doing what they're supposed to be doing. I personally don't see it as excessive. As long as we don't start down the path of weaponizing accreditation, then I think things are okay.
For follow-up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had a follow-up to that, and then you said something that made me think about that. I wanted to clarify something. You had mentioned SDE would kind of come up with some different things on that checklist every year of new priorities. Those are, the ones that are listed on here that with the red new next to them, those are all, those all have a statutory reference. So those are all things that I will make sure I understand the process. They're checking new laws that we passed, not just things that they just decided to check. Is that correct?
That's probably not 100% true because they can put State Board of Education mandated items on there that have not gone through the legislative process.
They came through the rules process? Would that be?
Maybe I should say the legislation did not submit bills and approve bills.
In my
For follow-up.
Thank you. My last one, I think, hopefully, is you mentioned we shouldn't weaponize accreditation. I think that's part of an undercurrent, and I don't know that that's necessarily the goal of anybody, but I guess my question would be, what is a solution? If we've got schools that aren't doing their job, if you don't want to weaponize accreditation, what do we do with that? If we've got a school that's not performing, not doing their job, there are businesses that don't do their job. Like I said, I run a healthcare organization. There are healthcare organizations that don't do their job effectively. They don't follow the rules. They're not. What do we do with that?
I think that would be something to be addressed outside of meeting the accreditation standards. I think the purpose of the standards for accreditation are as they are written in that manual, and I think I feel like the purpose of the accreditation audit should be that to ensure that the districts are meeting those standards.
Representative Provenzano, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I just want to echo, I think it would be helpful if we could take a look at this entire multi-page packet, which actually gives me heartburn because I'd done that and I thought I left it behind. But there are several redundancies in this packet that we report on in multiple different locations. In other areas of the things we send to the State Department of Education. It would be helpful to get a list of what's redundant for schools that could be taken out, that we address through other means, I think would be informative, if for no other reason, if you all would be interested and willing to provide such a thing to the committee.
Yeah, be happy to.
Thank you.
I see no further questions. Mr. Vice Chair.
No one has any questions for any of our other presenters? Okay, I think we are officially 1 minute over, so we did a really good job of catching back up. So I would like to thank everyone. Thank you to Owasso Schools, my guys in District 74 for being here and the presentation that was made. Thank you to SDE and to Cognia as well for all the information. We're very appreciative of it, and keep in mind that we are all ears on what makes this process work better, and we would love any kind of input that you guys could lend to the process. Thank you again, and we will be here tomorrow, 9 a.m. Goodbye, God bless. Have a great day.